Well, welcome everybody to this session. And as we start off, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we are on, which is the Durag people of the Eora Nation, and to all the traditional owners of all the people who are on the webinar today. So we hope that this will be a helpful one. It's a part of ongoing series that we do with Be Slavery Free. And my name is Fuzz Kiddo. I'm the National Co-Director, and Carolyn Kiddo is the other National Co-Director. So today we're looking at what we think is one of the most exciting pieces of technology that we have observed and come across for a long, long time. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. But what this helps with is for those of you who are in companies and those of you who are consumers also to actually understand something of the tools in traceability. The traceability is incredibly important. Traceability is one of the key ways to make the invisible visible. When it comes to slavery around the world, it's an illegal trade, and so many times people come to us, particularly from the media, and say, what are the statistics, what are the facts? Well, no one knows exactly what that is. And so with the modern slavery acts that have been coming in and the mandatory due diligence coming into the EU and other countries around the world, one of the important things that we have seen has been this whole area of traceability. And when we had companies come to us after we had done some of our early campaigning and say, yeah, we think you're right. I think traceability is important. How do we do it? We thought, oh my goodness, we have actually got to upskill and we've got to develop relationships and partner with those who know how to do these things to help companies to be able to do that, but also give the confidence to consumers about what is happening in that way. Carolyn.
So this has become even more heightened in recent times, and this is the latest jargon in this area, is that increasingly governments are bringing in regulation or legislation where there is a component of this which is called rebuttable presumption or presumptive rebuttability, just to be able to put it both ways. And that means that where there's reasonable evidence, although not fully conclusive, that goods are being imported into a country that are made by forced labour, then governments are putting in place procedures where they can detain those imports, those products, until conclusive proof is provided by the importer that those particular products do not have forced labour in their supply chain. Now, this is a bit of a game changer, and probably the country which has been using it the most is the US. However, there is a bill going to be presented soon into the Australian Parliament, which will include rebuttable presumption related to forced labour being imported into Australia. And it's in discussion in a number of other countries such as the UK, Canada, and in Europe. Now, this raises a whole question. It's great for the government to put in place a law. However, they need to be able to enforce the law. And secondly, businesses who have to comply with the law need to be able to find a way to work with the law so that it both gives them a competitive advantage because of the processes that they are using, but it also means that they can be clear about where their products come from. So the product, the Oritain product we're going to tell you, well, we're not, Sandon and Michaela are going to tell you about today, is a product that can be used for a whole range of things. And I first of all came in touch with this kind of technology where I met a man who was working in a basement of a church, and he said, I can tell you within 250 meters where a cow comes from in Australia, and therefore I can tell you if there's hormones in what it's eating or not. And I kind of pricked up my ears and said, well, I'd be interested to know how this works. And basically you'll hear how it works a bit further on. But when people make claims, they also need to be able to substantiate those claims. And we think that this is one tool in human rights processes. All tools have to be used by humans, and slavery is something that requires changes in human attitudes and human behaviours, and this is a great tool to trigger that. So first of all, we're going to be hearing from Sebastian Connolly. Sebastian Connolly, sorry. Keep making you into Billy. Sebastian works for Country Road and David Jones. And whenever I have a conversation with Sebastian, I come away from it thinking, wish I had more time to have conversations with Sebastian, because he has not only insights, wisdom and experience, but he's prepared to push the edges a little bit in terms of what if we could do this. Sebastian is also on the Minister's expert panel on modern slavery. So we need to recognise him as an expert in this area once you get into an expert panel. So Sebastian, thank you for being prepared to be with us today and to talk through the processes that you and your team have been part of putting in place to address human rights, and how this particular tool has helped you with what it is that you're seeking to do. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Carolyn and Fuzz. Thanks, appreciate the introduction and for inviting me to speak today. It's a pleasure to be talking with such an esteemed group of people here today, and hopefully share some of our insights, and that's really what we're here to do today. And as I share my screen up here, as we know, modern slavery, forced labour and human rights abuses continue to occur throughout the world, and really connected to every industry and every country, and affecting millions of people within our communities. And whether you're joining us from the apparel sector, textile, fashions, food, consumer goods, materials, or any other industry, and whether you're a small business or a large enterprise, we really all need to be making progress on addressing forced labour, modern slavery and human rights abuses. And for those really early on in the journey, I guess the good thing is that there's plenty of businesses that are out there to take learnings from. Some of those companies have dialed in today and joining us and have done some amazing work. So I say, look at the peers and look at the people really doing things. Their work on traceability, supplier engagement, and really addressing modern slavery risks. And governments and businesses globally continue to make headway to assess and address forced labour and modern slavery through legislation, policy, and really leader-led actions. But it's not easy. So we need to really continue to collaborate and learn from each other to make significant changes. And Principle 18 of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights talks to the need for business to engage and collaborate with stakeholders and experts to help assess and address human rights risks. And with your suppliers, your peers, NGOs, unions, multi-stakeholder initiatives, and human rights experts. These groups really enable faster change, increase leverage, share insights, create the change and drive a better environment within the ecosystem of your industry and your business. And that's why we're here today with Be Slavery Free and Oritain to collaborate, engage and share our learnings and some practical ways with the aim to help business protect the most vulnerable people. And this brings me to the intersection of our work with Oritain and the topic of this webinar, which is really proving the origin of our products. And a few years ago, when we first were introduced to the Oritain business, we didn't actually engage them in primary response to addressing human rights risks. However, what the engagement did was really become the catalyst for our business to recognise and to think harder about traceability. Fundamental and essential to assessing and addressing human rights risks is knowing your supply chain. And what it helps us to know, what it helps us to prevent and mitigate against, and also what it can unlock for our business operationally as well. And we were first introduced to Oritain by an Australian cotton farm who had already mapped their farm's fingerprint themselves. And Sandon and Michaela will explain more about fingerprints later on. And they did this themselves. This farm did this themselves as a farming business to protect their cotton after it had left their premises, after it had been picked and harvested and gone across the farm. So they did that so it was stopped being substituted further downstream from their operations once it had left their business. You know, this innovative thinking and the purpose of shared value of protecting the origin of the fibre and being responsible for who they were and who they were working with was doing the right thing, and that's doing good business.
Oritain scientifically verifies the origin of natural products, including clothes and garments that you may wear. This is an important process because you see lots of claims on labels that might be about origin and sustainability, but oftentimes they don't actually have any verification of those claims. So we want to ensure that origin is not just something on a label and that it has meaning and that it's underpinned by scientific traceability.
We want to support Australian farmers, and Oritain verifies that we're doing exactly that by tracing our verified cotton and our verified merino ranges back to Australian farms.
So the Oritain process is we develop our chemical fingerprint. We've actually gone out and we've collected samples from the major producing areas of the world for cotton and wool. And then we get what we call audit samples or test samples and test those against our established baseline.
At Country Road, we recognise that sustainability underpins good business. We want our customers to feel proud of every Country Road product they take home.
Country Road's commitment to this means that they're really a front runner in this realm. They're committed to telling the origin story, they're committed to the producers, and they're the first ones from Australia to really do this from beginning to end.
And what that video doesn't show is the amount of work and engagement we had to do with our suppliers and their sub-suppliers from the farm upwards and our suppliers downwards, down through the supply chain to engage, educate, get buy-in in all aspects of the production cycle and the supplies involved. Years ago, generally in the fashion industry, a brand would specify a quality of fabric or yarn. And beyond the quality and performance requirements of that fabric or fibre, provenance wasn't really considered important. The work with Oritain pushed us to understand the supply chain more, to know more about the risk of blending and substitution and where that may occur. And it really drove us to engage suppliers, sub-suppliers, farmers, spinners, and fabric mills to drive collaboration and share our vision of what the outcomes we were seeking. And this on the screen is just one of the maps of the value chain. Each industry, each individual product will have a different number of events, a different supply chain, and the people involved in the product and manufacturing and sourcing of any item. And getting all of these actors in every product to protect the origin is really challenging. And what happened was, if I can tell a story, is that we actually had some yarn that tested inconsistent with the origin fingerprint that we'd requested. And cotton was found to be substituted at the yarn mill stage. And this was a really big learning experience for us to connect, educate, and build the awareness of the spinner, who was adamant that they'd supplied us with yarn coming from where we specified. Although it seemed like a failure at the time, it really enabled a learning experience that provided the supplier and us with an opportunity to understand the risks of our requirements and to improve their processes to ensure that no substitution of origin specifications occurred in the future. And luckily we managed to discover this before it was made into garments. So we didn't actually use that yarn in our products. And this wasn't because that the yarn did or didn't come from a high risk location, but it was because it didn't match our specified origin fingerprint. And Oritain can talk to that a little bit more. We managed to resolve this issue early because early on in the process, when we first engaged with Oritain, we took some time and we understood the risk of substitution or blending of fibres, and we knew that would most likely happen at the yarn stage. And this risk profile was really important to us, mapping out how to use the technology and where the risk points were in that blending or substitution. And this was critical. This was a critical point in testing before it went into our garments. And this work has led to further engagement and collaboration with our suppliers, and it unlocks the ability for us to collaborate on addressing human rights risks together. Just as an example, one of our suppliers who partnered with us early on in this journey in the verification project is now actually extending what they do to us beyond just traceability and fibre. And now they're even engaging us to implement a grievance mechanism within their fee as they continue to increase their partnership transparency and even really exceed our expectations. And breaking down the barrier of an opaque business is critical to addressing modern slavery, forced labour and human rights risks. And when traceability is embedded into BAU, it allows business to strengthen their due diligence and auditing actions and unlock the ability to move beyond compliance to identify new ways of continuous improvement in addressing the risks at all levels of the supply chains. But we can't really rely on science and technology to solve all the issues in the supply chain. You know, they need to be part of the toolbox of processes that we integrate into our businesses to support the ongoing efforts we take to strengthen our due diligence and really protect what matters. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Sebastian. And it raises a whole lot of things which are just so important. And one of the key ones of those that you mentioned there, Sebastian, is really the continual work in progress. And we will have failures. Sometimes we call them excellent failures in those ones that you were talking about there, because that's how we learn. And whether we are in businesses, whether we are business providers, whether we are NGOs, civil society or government, we are all learning within this. And I think that's the thing, that when we can share and work together and partner, we have an incredible capacity to be able to grow and to develop what is possible. So thank you for that. And we really appreciate that presentation, what you are doing personally, and also what the company is doing in giving some leadership and modeling some of the ways forward that really can make that difference. Oritain is a company that we first came across when we were asked to speak at a food integrity conference. They said to us it was the time when the Modern Slavery Act was starting to be developed, and we were lobbying to try and bring it in. And they said, well, you know, we keep coming across slavery all the time in auditing for integrity of the produce and elements within different products. Come and tell us about this. So we stayed for the whole conference, and one of the presenters was Oritain, and we just looked, and just Carolyn kept looking at each other going, oh my gosh, this is a game changer. This really is something which will increase all the capacities, because so often we would have different companies say to us, oh, but we don't know, there's a blend, we don't know where it all comes from, we don't know what's happening with this. And we've seen it also in the modern slavery statements that have come in for the first lot for the Australian Modern Slavery Act, where in the first lot that came in, about the first 1,000, only 6% went past their first tier in reporting and doing a risk analysis. Of course, the the primary products and the sources can be down at the very least in tier 4. It might be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And what Oritain is going to present to you now is right down the bottom to the raw products. And if we can start from the raw products and then work from the top down, some of those things Sebastian was saying about the human elements and putting together with other capacities, then we have a chance to do that. Sebastian and Michaela are going to present.
Sandon and Michaela.
Sandon, sorry, Sebastian. Sandon and Sebastian are going
and
now,
Michaela.
and Michaela are going to, oh, get it right, yet, are going to share their insights and what they do. So, Sandon, first of all, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fuzz and Carolyn, for the opportunity to share with your audience today a little bit about Oritain. Let me just bring some slides up and make sure that everyone's seeing them. So I think they should be in front of everyone now. So yeah, we've just got a handful of slides today to share with your audience, following on from, I suppose, a really great example provided by Sebastian, one of our key clients, Country Road in Australia. And what we'll look to do is talk about what, in fairness, is one tool for our clients, but yeah, we think it is clearly a new tool and an interesting technology. You've talked it up, so a little bit of pressure on ourselves, but I can say that when I did join Oritain myself 4 years ago, I truly believe I saw the future. And it's just wonderful to be working in an organisation where, like the sentiment you've already suggested, we're all kind of working together to do good and make a bit of good difference in the world we all share. So we don't have too much time. What myself will cover off is a quick overview. A little bit of a kind of a deep dive or an introduction to the science and the process. And then I'll hand over to my colleague, Michaela, who's based in Milan, and she'll talk a little bit about applications and benefits and one or two kind of good examples to follow on from the nice, I suppose, content that Sebastian's already shared. I think if there's one key message that we would like everyone to take away from today is it's quite simple, but if you want to be truly certain of where something comes from, you need to test the actual product itself. And often this topic and Oritain and what we do falls under the larger sphere of traceability. So I'm glad that's been part of the introduction, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the following slides. So Oritain effectively, or put simply, use forensic science to verify the origin of products. The forensic science that we use is not created by Oritain. It's established, robust science that's been used for decades for the purposes of homicide, ballistics, glass fragment analysis. All we have done is applied that to the three main verticals described here, being food, fibre, and pharmaceuticals. But we are 13 years old now. So we were founded in 2008 by Professor Russell Frew, who is a world-leading expert in using analytical chemistry to trace the origin of products. And Professor Frew is also an advisor to the UN on this kind of subject matter. Over these 13 years, we've developed significant IP in the traceability of raw and processed food products, as well as fibre and pharmaceutical industries. I think for the purpose of today, this presentation is a little bit more skewed to cotton, but making the point that the science is applicable to all products. And in terms of where we are up to in our growth, We currently have offices in 5 countries, so New Zealand, Australia, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and the USA. Roughly 50-50 gender split globally, and we're working with a number of multinationals across all of these industries and sectors, providing our services in more than 20 countries. So just wanted to share this slide fairly early on in the piece, and it comes under this idea of the word traceability, which I think was your introduction, and the importance of it as the foundational piece of the puzzle around the issue of human rights is absolutely correct. And so if we start on the right-hand side of this slide, we're trying to describe with some simple graphics traditional traceability. And again, using the example of cotton and how Sebastian has described it, that the cotton is clearly grown in a paddock somewhere in the world, in a field. It's ginned, it's spun, it's woven, it's dyed, it's cut and sewn and turned into a final product. Now, all of that sounds a little bit simple, but in the real world, it's clearly a long and complex supply chain with product being shipped all sorts of places. And what traditional traceability requires is the product to have some form of paper or label-based system. And the accuracy of that information is only as good as what's claimed in the label of the product. And clearly, I suppose Sebastian has been somewhat brave in sharing with everyone stories of them receiving inconsistent results, but that is effectively how we help. So moving to the left-hand side, what Oritain is measuring is the intrinsic properties of the product itself. And I'll talk a little bit more around the science behind that, but this word origin fingerprint is unique to that product. It cannot be replicated. And therefore, it allows us to be in a position to work with our clients to take product from any point in the supply chain and test if it is true to its claimed origin. So I'll just talk a little bit more specifically on the science and then the process in terms of how we do what we do, which enables the kind of work we do with Country Road. And just to start with going back to the forensics world, I thought a handful of cases might be interesting and topical for the audience. Now, the first one there, the Pong Su, actually is being created into quite an impressive kind of documentary type show of late, but it relates effectively to heroin being smuggled into Australia, and put really simply, the same science that Oritain employs was used to determine that heroin came from North Korea, implicating that country in the matter. The second example there, Operation Compass, relates to a body, a dead body, that was presented at a hospital in Wales. Now, through the fingerprints on the body, the identity of the person was known. However, they had no idea how this person had ended up there, and due to the fact that the person was Southeast Asian descent. Now, looking at effectively isotopic profiles of this person's hair, which I'll talk about how isotopes fit into the equation in a second. Because your hair grows at a constant rate, and because some of the key isotopes that get measured are hydrogen and oxygen, which are of course in water, which us human beings need to drink every day to survive. Some analysis of the isotopic profile of this person's hair was able to basically show that prior to death, they had, over a 15-month period, moved from Vietnam, the Ukraine, Germany, Dover, London, Birmingham, and then finally the place of death in Wales. And the last case in terms of an example of the forensic science being used is the 1080 milk powder scandal related to Fonterra in New Zealand. Fonterra, obviously a large, certainly the largest in New Zealand dairy producing company, and 1080 being a very powerful poison. So the supply chain was compromised. It was confirmed that the poison was in the supply chain. And again, the same science was used to determine where the poison had come from, and with that, the person responsible. And that person ended up receiving, I think, 8 to 9 years jail time. Now, they're just 3 really quick examples, but the point is, in sharing them up front, is that the science that Oritain use as a basis for what we do is not Oritain's. So the point is that it is well-established, peer-reviewed, robust science used globally for forensics, stands up in a court of law. All Oritain have done is applied that same science to the verticals we currently work in, food, fibre, and pharmaceuticals. So just quickly talking about what we are actually looking at and how an origin fingerprint is created by nature. First and foremost, a question we often get asked is it DNA testing? No, it's not DNA testing. DNA testing is telling you what something is. What we are measuring and what's kind of displayed in this graphic is a combination of trace elements and isotopes, which are unique to all geographies around the world. And these are partitioned or taken up and absorbed by the plants and animals based on where they were produced, reared, or grown. And that is what we are measuring with the same kind of science techniques. And then beyond the science itself is a lot of kind of powerful statistics and high-level kind of data work to do what we do, which I'll explain a little bit further now. So I think just moving along this slide a little bit quickly because it's a bit wordy, but effectively what we need to do what we do is genuine samples in first instance of the real product. And there is a lot of kind of standard operating procedure and protocol around chain of custody to ensure that they are genuine samples. But with those and with analysing those samples, we effectively elucidate the origin fingerprint for that product. That fingerprint is then stored in Oritain's database, and we are then in a position to audit samples from throughout the supply chain and be able to share results with the client as to if the product is what it says it is, like the examples that Sebastian provided earlier. Just looking at the bottom of this slide, the science is actually very powerful. So it can get drilled down to farm level. I suppose like the example Caroline described in her opening, but we will always work with the client and the situation in terms of a bespoke program and solution relevant to the requirements. So moving to applications and benefits. Well, the application is really quite simple. Once we have these established baseline origin fingerprints of genuine product, we're in a position to work with our clients to take samples from any point in the supply chain. And I suppose that's the benefit of what we do, is that we can test anything from anywhere, anytime. And there are a lot of smarts around what we do in terms of rolling out operational our programs operationally. But effectively, we're verifying the origin at any point in the supply chain, which enables clients to ensure compliance with responsible sourcing policies or to substantiate origin-related commitments and claims. And I think I'll hand over to Michaela following this slide, but in terms of the method itself, it's reiterating the first point that it is a product test. So we're measuring what exists naturally in the product. And I think the fact that what we're measuring is just there innately from Mother Nature is just nice and neat. So there's no addition of any foreign traces such as sprays or particles. And as has already been alluded to, we are effectively tracing the product or verifying the product back to its origin. You know, a piece of dirt, exactly where it was in a field or region, farm, country, etc. It's manufacturing friendly, so nothing needs to get added anywhere in terms of machinery or systems, and yeah, clearly it's commercially proven. Michaela will talk a little bit about the different products categories that we work across, but the forensic science meets the Daubert standard, which means it can be used as evidence in the court of law. So with that, I will let Michaela jump in and talk about a few more things.
Great, thanks very much, Sandon, and thanks everyone for joining. So while Sandon spoke about the science specifically, I will dive more a bit into the applications and how we are supporting our clients. So more and more of our clients are now asking us to help them with the application of our technology to understand where their products are coming from, and specifically where the origin of the raw materials in their products are. And this is because it allows them to validate and also substantiate their responsible sourcing claims, which is, as we just discussed until now, becoming increasingly important. I guess another of our key messages is that it is impossible for companies or brands to claim that they're sourcing ethically or sustainably. They are free of slave labor unless they know exactly and they can prove where their products come from. So the beauty of our science is that it can be applied to any natural product. You can see on the screen some of the product categories we are working with. And these products, as many others that we consume every day, have very long, complex, and also fragmented supply chains, where there are many different actors involved. Therefore, as Sebastian was mentioning just a few minutes ago, ensuring that such products are made ethically and are free of slave labor is extremely hard. We know that visibility down these supply chains is not easy, but at the same time, we also know that many of these products have serious human rights related issues, and therefore it is important that companies do whatever they can and also use all the available tools to ensure that they mitigate possible risks. And of course, traceability is a fundamental piece of this puzzle for the reason I was just speaking about. At the same time, responsible sourcing has become very important also in terms of for companies, also in terms of the pressures that have been put on companies by different stakeholders, being consumers, investors, always more regulators and legislators, and also the civil society that are now holding companies accountable for the possible illegal practices that are involved in the making of their products. So for these reasons, a big part of the work, I would say most of the work that we do with our clients, is to work together to help them understand where they're sourcing from, understand a bit more about their supply chain, improve their due diligence practices, and at the same time, given the changing environment that we are witnessing, also support them in mitigate the possible reputational, economic, and more even legal risks that may arise if they fail to do so. So I wanted to give a few concrete examples of the programs that we have with our clients. So I'll now present a couple of examples, starting with cotton, which given the focus of the work of Be Slavery Free and also the intervention of Sebastian, we know that there's been put a lot of focus on the cotton industry. And we wanted to provide an example of a work we are doing with one of our key clients, Cone Denim, which is a denim mill. So we know that the cotton situation in the situation in the cotton industry, given the forced labor concerns that there have been reported in many parts of the world, is concerning. And these at the same time made many proactive actors in the industry to act quickly and to ensure that they are 100% certain that they are sourcing the cotton that they are told they are sourcing. So therefore there is compliance with their sourcing policy, and at the same time that they are not they're not exposed, they're not using cotton which comes from areas that are of concern to them due to these forced labor practices. So Condenim is a great example, as it is one of our clients that have put considerable effort in scientifically testing their products continuously and on an ongoing basis. And this is to keep their supply chain monitored and to get comfort for themselves, but also to provide comfort to their clients and also to the consumers that they're not using or supplying cotton that may be linked to forced labor practices. And the insights that we provide with these products are with these programs are very useful, for instance, for Condenim, and this gives them the opportunity to monitor compliance with the sourcing policy, but at the same time to act, to take action and to adjust their sourcing policy based on the insights that they get. At the same time, something I wanted to mention is that we are all aware of the attention that has been put on this specific topic from different governments, members of parliaments, and regulators around the world. Faz and Caroline were just speaking about it at the beginning of our webinar. And it is challenging for our clients, but at the same time, it is important for them to ensure that, to demonstrate compliance with these legislations and regulations. And at the same time to demonstrate that they do whatever they can to do due diligence, to do the proper new due diligence. And this is also by using different tools, including forensic science. And this is also a big part of how we have been helping our clients by providing supporting evidence of the actions that they're taking. So I'll now move to another interesting example, which is a different industry, but has similar issues. So besides being able to verify different products, another benefit of Oritain science is that we can verify the origin of a product at different resolutions. So that can be down to even a farm of origin, and the resolution that we test for and we verify depends on the client's specific needs. So cocoa is a great example of a product that requires much improvement, I would say, in the traceability closer to the source of origin, because that's where most of the issues are, and because in order to ensure that the cocoa beans are sourced from regions and farms where there are ethical labor practices in place. So for this reason, cocoa is another key product we have been focusing on, and we have developed our capability with this product. With our technology, we can differentiate and test the origin of cocoa down to a country, a region, a sub-region, and even a farm of origin. So this is extremely powerful. And I also wanted to show an example of our science works. So the graph you can see on the right side of the screen, that's actually, that shows the output of the science and the statistical models that we apply. And this represents the fingerprints of 4 different farms that are close to one another, located in a region in the Ivory Coast. Actually, 2 farms are as close as 270 meters from one another, so extremely close. And you can see that there are different clusters with different colors in the graph, and each cluster represents a farm of origin, and each little dot that you see in the graph represents a sample of a cocoa beans that come from that farm. So you can see how these group together, and this means that each farm has a different geochemical fingerprint, and we were able to differentiate that. You can also see Nick Dexter, who is our global operations lead. I'm sure he's listening to us right now, and he went directly to the Ivory Coast to take part in the project and collect samples and also understand more about the supply chain from the ground. So this is, I guess, the end of our presentation, and I hope that with Sandon's intervention and also the two examples that I gave, we passed the message that our science is innovative, it's extremely varied in its application and potential, and can bring benefits to our clients with different programs. But at the same time, most importantly, that it was received as a valuable tool to improve traceability, compliance, and responsible sourcing with products and in their supply chains. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michaela. And it is fascinating to get that insight into what you do and at I know a very high level and what the capacities are. And so I hope that people watching are starting to get some questions coming up. A couple have already come in. We mentioned it on the intro clip, but if you didn't see that or you're not aware of it, in the wonderful Zoom platform down the bottom in the black bar down the bottom, the second from the right is Q&A. If you click on that, you can write your questions in on that, and then we'll moderate those questions, and we'll ask the different presenters who might be able to best answer that. So Carolyn, there might be a couple that you can lead off with.
Yep. Thanks, Nick. You're putting some good answers in there for people, and there have been some other answers to questions, but here's probably a really simple one. Michaela or Sandon, can you trace products containing polysilicon?
I'm happy to jump in there. I think it's an interesting question, a sensitive one. We are getting a lot of inquiry. I think the short answer is we're looking into it for obvious reasons. But I think that's if someone would like to talk to us about it in more detail, like all of the kind of products mentioned, we work with many. So yeah, if anyone would like to talk in more detail offline, we'd be more than happy to.
Great. So there's been a couple of questions about how does this actually help slavery. So I'm actually going to have a go at that, and then might let other people jump in as well. For a number of years, we've been working in the tea gardens in Assam, which is in the northeast of India. And the conditions of labour there are probably forced labour. And there's so much poverty that slave traders are able to basically operate unfettered. And a few years ago, our partners up there were telling us that as many as 1,000 children a day are trafficked out of those tea gardens into other parts of India, sometimes into Nepal or to the Middle East. So the question is, this part of the world, 50% of the world's tea has Assamese tea in it because it's like cordial. It's the robust, consistent flavoured base. If you want delicate fine tea, you go to Darjeeling. If you want consistent taste, you go to Assam. So it's a really good evening out type tea. Now, the government of India, you have to sell 50% of the tea that you grow to the tea auctions that are held in India. And so 50% of it at least ends up in these massive tea auctions which are held in Kolkata and Guwahati. And people say once the tea gets to the tea auctions, you cannot tell where it's come from. So if you don't want to drink tea that has as its base this kind of slavery, basically the answer is tough. You can't figure it out. And tea companies kind of hide behind that because they say, well, you know, once it's all blended, nobody knows where it's come from. This technology, although I note that tea is not on the list of products at the moment, but this technology would mean that a company who wants to make sure that they're only using tea that is not grown under those conditions could actually get their tea tested. 30% of the tea grown in Assam is grown by smallhold tea growers who have great labour conditions. So you could also, I would imagine, separate out this tea is got tea that's from smallhold tea farmers, and this tea is coming from these plantations because they're very defined areas geographically. So it then allows a consumer to make a decision, a business to make choices about the worker rights that they allow to happen in their business, and for campaigners like us to drive change. Okay, I'm just looking down at the next questions. Hold on, open. There's similar tech in the fish industry. Yeah, so Nick, you're answering that one. That's great. So thank you for doing that. I guess a question to you, Sebastian. In terms of your job as being a human rights supply chain person for a retailer and a fashion label, what has Oritain been able to do for you, and what doesn't it do?
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn, and I think a really good question, and one that came up on the chat before. You know, does it prove your products don't come from forced labour? And I think you know, as I said, I think in my part of the presentation was talking about when we actually did get a negative result or an inconsistent result, that then said that it wasn't where we said it was coming from. So it can prove, as been clearly talked about, where it did come from. So if you know the farm, but it also can prove where it doesn't come from. But it doesn't necessarily tell you if there is human rights in there. But what it does when it proves that it did come from somewhere is that our supply chain that we've built through all the layers, they actually moved that product, that wool, that cotton, that, you know, fish, tea, whatever the product is, they moved it through all the supply chain actors that we thought they were using. And it proved from start to finish, essentially, that the supply chain is complete. And then we get the chance to do human rights due diligence on every part of the supply chain throughout there. So it allows us to prove that origin and then act on our human rights due diligence through the supply chain. Whereas if something's been substituted or blended, you actually don't know where it comes from. So you don't get the chance to do human rights due diligence.
Yep, great, good answer. I know that Nick, who's also part of the Oritain team, is madly answering questions. But Nick, do you just want to put your camera on, and I'll introduce you, because if you're going to talk to someone, most of our participants are from Australia or New Zealand. So if you're going to talk to somebody, this is who you're likely to talk to in Australia or New Zealand. This webinar was very intentionally high level. And if there are people on here who want to know more, who want to go into more detail, so for example, somebody has asked about the customer portal, then the Oritain people are really happy to show you that customer portal. If you're wanting to engage them around particular products, they're happy to have that conversation. Is that right, Nick?
Absolutely, yep. Based here in Sydney, we can share my contact information, have a chat offline, or we can put you in touch with someone else from our team in New Zealand. So yeah, right. Thank you.
A question to Sandon and Michaela. I guess when we look at some of this kind of approaches, I'm interested to know what your motivation is. Are you just, you know, techo-scientific geeks who love the science and solving problems, or what's the motivation of the people that work for you? Why do they want to do this?
I'm happy to kind of jump in first, and then Michaela can follow on. So I think just like we've been around for 13 years, the original motivation was to protect the interests of reputable producers and brands exporting from New Zealand and Australia, and then protecting, I suppose, their investment. A lot of producers who want to do the right thing, who want a quality product, a safe product, build a brand, that can get jeopardized in this realm of counterfeit, which I think it's fair to say, certainly for food, happens to a reasonable extent in Asia, where a lot of those exports are destined. So that was the original motivation, to answer your question, Carolyn. But I think through our evolution, I mean, our work in cotton was a little bit by chance, based on the exact supplier or producer in Australia that Sebastian mentioned, seeing the work that we did with New Zealand wool, and then us starting to work with cotton. And then that's been a huge focus for the business, and an incredible kind of deep dive into that vertical for the last 3 or 4 years. And off the back of that, I think kind of both Sebastian and Michaela have made the point that we've kind of arced ourselves into this increasing kind of requirement, if you want to call it that, around these ESG issues, which, you know, I can recall back at Nestle 15 years ago, CSR being topical and talked about, but it really truly only feels in the last 5 or so years where the rubber is really hitting the road. And so more and more, I mean, we are a growing company, but there are more and more people coming into the business who maybe less have the kind of the production background, someone like myself, and more expertise like Michaela around human rights and ESG, et cetera, because we're only getting more and more inquiries for that space. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Michaela?
No, I think you've covered it well, Sandon. I am definitely not a scientist, and I understand the minimum of the science that we do. We have a great team of scientists, and we do a great job, but it's definitely not just about that. And probably the only additional points that I wanted to make is that it is, as explained during the case studies, it's not just about getting a result and a yes or no tick regarding the origin, but it's also the insights that we provide and how these can be actioned by our clients. And this is extremely important to ensure that there is more progress towards more responsible sourcing and more visibility in the supply chain. And yes, absolutely agree with Sandon that this is the motives that are mainly driving our current clients, and also the work that we do at Oritain. There is also a great job that we do with different stakeholders, with different smallholders around the world, which we're more than happy to talk about when we'll have time. But yeah, definitely that's the case.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. And we think that there has been a bit of information there, but of course it's only the beginning of the information there. And should you want to know more, and I hope you will, then you can check that out as we've mentioned there. And if you want to follow up here, the URL for the recording of this webinar can be sent out to you. Anna will send those out to you. You can also receive from Anna, you will also receive from Anna, the contact details for the speakers and for the companies. Be Slavery Free has a business association membership, which offers tools, training, advice, and concierge services, and that'll come to you as well. And please let us know if we can be of further help to you in really using these tools, which we think are taking up the next step of being able to really find out how it is that we can trace back to origins. We can add one tool with another tool, we can help sort of work out where the risks are, through to the point of in businesses being able to have clean supply chains, and then for consumers to have the confidence to shop with those particular companies that are taking the effort to really go back to seeing the different parts of the supply chain becoming visible. So thank you so much to Sandon and to Michaela. Thank you to Sebastian. Thank you for Nick for coming on and answering the questions too. And please keep tuned for other webinars that are coming up. We are going to be doing more webinars with Oritain, linking up with some of those other tools as well, so you get to see a much broader view and increase the capacity. So together, we really believe we can make a difference here. Thank you much, everybody, and we look forward to seeing the ways you can apply this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
That went well.